Hello, everyone. Greetings and eternal grand rising. So I'm very excited and happy to welcome you to our podcast, Quantum Nurse Freedom International Livestream. And I'm taking a little detour from the usual geopolitical economic situation topics that I've been doing, but trust that this special episode of this podcast will still be connected to whatever is happening because in source consciousness field everything is connected, and when we understand the connection of everything, we have a better way of responding to what's going on in the world. So welcome to our podcast, where today we delve into the topic of solar consciousness, how the sun protects us from galactic chaos. And so I'm very happy and also excited to present to you my special guest, Dr. Alfredo, who has been a friend to me and to George and to many of a number of us who we consider as eternal brothers and sisters in this quest and in this journey. So, and he will lead us to explore the profound influence of our star on both our planet and our consciousness, examining how solar activity shapes life on Earth and safeguards us from the vast uncertainties of the cosmos. And unless you're living under the rock, you know that there's so many uncertainties going on in this planet and are outside our planet. So get ready for an enlightening journey into the symbiotic relationship between the sun and the universe, revealing the essential role it plays in the survival and well-being of humanity. So let's shine a light on this incredible connection. And as I said, in so doing, then we're better in our understanding, in our personal evolution, and at the same time, we make a tremendous difference in our community, in our family, and to the world around us. So thank you. And if any of this conversation in my platform, this one and the others, resonate to you, please do yourself a favor and others, always share it. And don't forget to give a thumbs up. And when you are ready, you could also give some donations to the guests and to yours truly. And welcome. And let me continue by introducing Dr. Alfredo. I'll give just a little brief of introduction for him. And as he continues, as he proceed with his presentation, because I did ask him to do a presentation for us, and then he can recommend more, or he can share more and more about himself and how he came into this journey. So Dr. Alfredo is been in the tech world and has been in different engineering responsibilities and work. So he lives in Europe and he's been in science for a long time, but like, behind the scenes, okay? Because, but I so even if he's behind the scenes, I would consider him as the whistleblower of what's really true in what's happening in science, in our consciousness, and then how our consciousness is able to really help us go through the motion of what's happening in this universe. Dr. Alfredo, welcome and thank you. And please, anything more you want to add for this introduction, be my guest. Can you hear me?
Thank you, Grace. Thank you for having you. Can you guys hear me?
Yes, yes, yes.
Oh, wonderful. So let's first thank you a lot, to have me here. And I did a little bit of research, on your podcast, and they're amazing. There's so many podcasts, all around, I would say, health topics, biohacking topics, and so on. Since we did the same, let's say, study of QMP, quantum morphogenetic physics, it's a pleasure for me to introduce some topics that are not only health related, they're more kind of on a cosmology consciously. And I would also like to welcome all the people listening and streaming here on this podcast. It's one of my first public podcasts I'm doing. I did a lot of research on the topic, actually on the sun. I did a lot of personal, meditations with the sun because it's all related. And when I go through this presentation, you will see why I say what I say. So yeah, from a background perspective, I was in high-tech computer technology. I have a degree in computer technology engineering as well. And writing my thesis to get my PhD or my QMP PhD, which is something special. You may consider the Bioregenesis Academy, which really is the foundation of this presentation. Before I studied quantum morphogenetic physics, my presentation would have looked completely different. It's really eye-opening, and I will walk you through the presentation just in a couple minutes. So from my look to tell you, probably very disruptive stuff, but because of many of you probably already know the Bioregenesis Academy, or eventually the podcast from Dr. Jerry Rivera Dugenio, the Jerry Unfiltered podcast. You may already know a lot of what I'm talking. I just try to bring this into, I would say, a more connected context. So far, thanks a lot, Grace. Thanks a lot, George, for having me here in this podcast. And I hope your listeners that usually have our sun, our star, that basically is the foundation of all life on this planet and solar system, plays its role in the context of interconnectedness, as you mentioned it, Grace. Back to you.
Thank you so much. And just in
Would you like
case,
me to continue with the presentation immediately, or was this just the intro?
yeah, just a little housekeeping for just in case for our viewers, not sure how they're hearing it, but if there's a little lapse, it's how the Wi-Fi is, so forgive us. But hopefully, it's just on my end that it's a little choppy. But nevertheless, everything will be shared according to what source wants us to share. Okay, so yes. And George, by the way, thank you for joining me. I know you've been busy in your work as well, but as a fellow adept in Bioregenesis Academy, thank you for helping me host Dr. Alfredo. And so yes, so Alfredo, you can please continue and go straight to your presentation.
Okay, thank you so much, Grace. And again, welcome to all the listeners, also those who just joined us now. I'll just start my presentation. Please help me, Grace. Can you see the slides already?
Yes, I'm gonna put it on there.
Wonderful.
Oh, let's go to the. You can put it back to the the beginning. Is that what you want? Right? Yeah.
I'm actually not able to go through the slides. It doesn't
Okay.
do anything.
All right.
Maybe you can
So
go
hang
back
on.
to slide number one.
Let me just. I'll do this other one. Hold on. Okay. There. Good.
Here we go. Yeah, that's much better.
Mhm.
So the topic today will be, the interconnectedness of everything with the source consciousness field. What the law of one basically says, that everything comes from the source consciousness field. Everything will return to the source consciousness field, and everything exists within the source consciousness field. And that's probably not what you heard from any other, I would say, bodies of knowledge, religions, or so on. But there's truly only one field that we all exist in. And when I did my thesis, and I was writing my thesis, I was actually doing a lot of research. Scientist I found out there, which was resonant with my topic, was Rupert Sheldrake. I think Rupert Sheldrake is very well known in the, I would say, science community, but as well as in the related science community, as the so-called, not the inventor, but he was the one that really minced the term morphic resonance and morphogenetic fields. And one-dimensional quantum morphogenetic physics model of a conscious sun. that everything is conscious in the cosmos. And he was actually one of the scientists that actually stepped out there and did lectures and presentations. And I highly recommend everyone listening here to listen to his speech and his thesis. Actually, he wrote a thesis about is our sun conscious, with a question mark. And that's why I say, I really would like to thank Rupert for bringing question, because in the traditional Newtonian science community, our sun is not more than a glowing ball of plasma, hot plasma, which it is absolutely not. And my thesis actually is trying to bring that consciousness expansion by using a 15-dimensional time-space model. The thing that Rupert basically postulated in his thesis is like a 3 or maximum 4-dimensional model. And, I felt called to write about the future of our sun. And we will do this through quantum morphogenetic physics. And quantum morphogenetic physics is not quantum physics. Quantum physics is basically the description of the quantum level in the physics. What we do, we basically stipulate that everything there exists, has a morphogenetic field, a quantum morphogenetic field. And the substance actually that the entire source consciousness field uses as a basis is pure. And that's not ether, as, for example, Nikola Tesla postulated. That's E2. That's a pre-substance ether, scalar, I would say, matter or field, where everything steps down from. And I'll go more into the details of that. So we will also talk about this materialization down step, because everything comes from this source consciousness field, and it goes through multiple steps, which we will look into. And, quantum morphogenetic physics in principle really describes how everything really can, except the Bioregenesis Academy is not taught on, mainstream, I would say, universities and academic, institutions. And my objective really is to not only explain, but also bring the, I would say, mathematical background, bring the empirical and statistical evidence that our sun is conscious, and there is an in-depth relationship between our sun, the Earth, the planet, which all has that morphogenetic field. So that's kind of a little bit the introduction. And I'll just move on. So you may ask yourself, probably what I said is not so new to me, because I either have done my research or have heard about this, or in the higher dimension being taught about that. But what is the relevance of quantum morphogenetic physics to the consciousness of the sun? And as I kind of already initially said, that we basically define the universe, which has multiple hierarchies. There are hierarchies, but the hierarchies are in terms of consciousness expansion and in terms of matter density, because everything steps down from the source consciousness field. And it's a multidimensional scalar morphogenetic field that literally encodes or builds the blueprint for everything that exists. And interestingly, the IIT is Mr. Tononi, a very renowned scientist, basically defined consciousness, information theory, which basically stipulates everything that basically collects data, like humans collect data through their senses, like vision, like hearing, like tasting, like touch. All these senses, if you start to integrate and basically process that data, that basically is the definition of the integrated information theory of Mr. Tononi. And therefore, I would say, based on my research on the sun, it literally does that, because there's multiple layers of plasma with the heliosphere, as the extended senses of the sun. So actually, the sun already qualifies by definition for a conscious being. And obviously, these scalar morphogenetic fields are actually guiding the manifestation, but not only the manifestation. Most people think manifestation is materialization. They confuse that. Manifestation is just the intention setting. So if you breathe in and you wish something, that's when you send out your intention. But when you start thought forms, which are pure scalar energy, come back through what we call the light body, and we all have a light body, and I go into that in my presentation later on. It will come back and literally materialize. It just depends on your consciousness and DNA activation. So I think from what I just said, this really provides a novel perspective in terms of the interconnectedness of all things, as Grace already said. And this really goes from a subatomic particle, from atomic particles to even, planets, to people, to galaxies, to entire cosmoses, because there's multiple cosmoses. That's also one of the things that is not taught. There's the multi galaxy theories and all of that. But anyway, let's move on. This is just kind of the relevance that we are going to look at. So let's take one step back and go a little bit into cosmic and human anatomy. And since we already postulated that, every human, but also every galaxy or planet or sun has a presentation, there is this little person here. And this person, the way actually source expressed its, I would say, intention originally to literally perceive itself or learn from itself or experience itself, was through a very deliberate grid. And that's why I basically overlaid this fractal grid. You also see the fractal grid here on the right, and source creation perspective, actually if the bioregenesis fractal grid doesn't have 12 spheres in this perfectly aligned angles, and you see here the 90-degree and the 45-degree angles here. If it's not that, you're literally disconnected in terms of co-resonance with source. So that's very important to keep in mind when you basically overlay. And if you kind of look through this picture, you would probably already see certain chakras here. You would see, the heart chakra. You would see the 15 chakras, because there is 15 dimension, and every chakra is related to its, corresponding dimension in the field. And you will also see the order here, because you see the harmonic universes. You have harmonic universes 1, dimension 1 to 3, dimension 4 to 5 to 6 is H2, harmonic universe 2, and so on and so forth. So I probably need to stipulate, when we did Bioregenesis Academy, we learned there was some manipulation from the original order, how everything was created by, I would say, to some malicious manipulation within our galaxy, and I'll go more deep into that. But I think this is basically just a graphical representation of the order, how it would look like in an eternal life galaxy. And if you look at the next, and please, at the end of the presentation, we reserved like 15 minutes of question and answer. So there's actually 2 expressions. When you would literally kind of an expression of expansion, everything started in first creation point. First creation point was literally when the unmaterialized side of source consciousness field, or we call it the unmanifest side of source consciousness field, has actually expressed its intention. And the intention was first, then there was sound, infrasound actually, and then there was light. Only then there was light, and from light there was, ethers and ethers and plasmas down to the real matter. And I described this later on in terms of the, I would say, resonance, or in musical term, harmonics, with the source, I would say, divine blueprint. You kind of get deviations, and you see the perfectly aligned source spiral, as we call it. It's also called crystal spiral, or for those who actually have been able to read the books of Ashayana Dean or Galactic Science. They listen to videos. There are many videos into morphogenetic physics and bioregenesis academy. So if you have this expression of expansion of consciousness, it goes, like in this spiral. There's actually 3 rotations happening. And this point up here would actually represent your as array, and your as array is located here. So we talk about human anatomy now, the ideal eternal life human anatomy. Your as array point, which is here at the thymus gland or at the upper chest, so to speak, is where you are you breathing consciously to connect with that point or not? Because there's an alternative to it. And if you look at the current science, if you look at the current mathematical model, I think everybody's aware about the Fibonacci ratios, going 1, 2, 3, 5, 7. So always you add the last numbers in order to get to a new one, which is literally from a mathematical point of view, just mathematics. But from an energetic point of view, it's siphoning the energy of the previous 2. It's not what actually Source intended. Source actually intended to provide all of us, all humans and all life forms basically out there with a morphogenetic field with eternal, perpetual source energy. So when you basically, or when someone basically doesn't follow the original source spiral, they may follow the Fibonacci spiral. I'll give you an example. If you, for example, use the flower of life, and I guess many out there would use that symbol. I've seen many friends even have it on their with, I think, 10 or 8 spheres. And, so it mathematically doesn't correspond with Source's intention. So it's disconnected from Source. So if you use that symbol, you kind of willingly encrypt your morphogenetic field with this red line here, which you see is not meeting, first, it all comes from first creation point. That's undisputed, even from the people deviating from the source spiral, but it will not meet you as a ray. So it will not feed you and everything that's connected. That's a fundamental, just to explain you how important mathematics is, how important alignment co-resonance is. And that basically brings me, and we can always go into deeper about that in the Q&A session, to the bioregenesis fractal grid. That's literally the structure everything was based upon, from a sandcorn, from a person, from every cell actually that you have, to every human, to every planet, to every sun, to every solar system, because the solar system would originally consist of 12 planets, also been tampered with in our cosmic history. And here we also get to the angles. You see, I mean, this source spiral here and the Fibonacci spiral, which are very intricately related to also the phi ratio and other mathematical functions, that a lot of scientists say, or even some alternative scientists say, oh, I found the formula, the world formula, where everything makes sense, because everything we observe in our galaxy is literally influenced by all of you. It's a distorted morphogenetic field in our entire galaxy with a huge, massive black hole at the center of the galaxy, and that's scientifically proven. That's the part where we all agree. And why is it that way? Because it's distorted, it's tilted. So every galaxy that is literally not connected to the eternity via first creation point will actually tilt. And that's why I actually show here the bioregenesis grid, which is still the fundament of order. And if you look at these pictures from, I would say, Hubble or James Webb, you'll see a lot of galaxies distorted. They don't, if you look at the galactic plane, they kind of tilted. So like you see it here. So I'll stop here with the, I would say, more the quantum morphogenetic background. I thought it's nice to basically show the interrelationship between the human and all its bodies. Each of these rings here represent a different body. So we have 5 Huva bodies, and you can explore those bodies. But with all the cataclysms we had, there's an actually a body of knowledge that teaches you how to reconnect. And I think Grace and George are one of the best examples for people that actually did that work and reactivated their original base 12 blueprint, being connected to first creation point. That's amazing in itself, and I commend them for that. So let's move on into more the cosmological aspect, and I kind of will present you a couple cases that I also use, by the way, in my thesis that will be published soon. So if you're really interested in cosmology and how everything fits together, you may want to read my thesis of a genetic model of a conscious sun. And I think there's not so many out there that write about a 15-dimensional model. So you should probably be easy. It should be easily found once it's published. So case number one here was actually, and we will talk a lot about the sun. The sun is a living being, and like people have morphogenetic fields. Most people talk about an aura. Your aura isn't static. Your aura expresses your feelings, your emotional states. It changes colors and so on. There's very gifted people, and they can see the colors changing, and they can literally read, the personal, I would say, state of the person that they're looking at. So the sun does exactly the same. It radiates energy. It radiates also matter in that case. And then we talk about the coronal mass ejection. So this particular case is interesting because on October 28, 2021, one of these coronal mass ejections was actually measured by different probes. And these probes were not just sitting on actually on the moon, which is an artificial object, but we will go into that later on. It was actually measured on the Earth, and it was measured on Mars, through the Mars rover. You probably all seen that funny-looking, nice rover that drives around on the Mars surface, digging holes into it and sending these wonderful pictures back to our planet. But what's interesting to see is that there is vast distances between these, planetary million kilometers, So you may say, of course, if the sun propagates one of these CME, it will arrive at the same time, in the sun and let's say the probes, but it probably would take a little bit longer to travel to Mars because, of course, initially it's pure consciousness, but afterwards there is actually very highly charged particles actually being emitted from the sun. So and I will show you some data about it as well, it literally measured the impact of that CME at the same time. And the European Space Agency, it was measured by the European Space Agency, and they were so nice to publish this, I think, in space.com, or obviously on their European Space Agency web page. So that's my first kind of evidence. If the measurement takes place at the same moment, that literally means that probably these particles can travel faster than light speed. Because if you look at the distances, maybe in this case it's not so obvious. Go ahead.
A question, Alfredo. So if you're talking about arriving at the same time, wouldn't you tie this to some effect of quantum entanglement that would play an effect why they arrived at the same time? Because even at the speed of light, there would be some time difference. But you're telling me all these mass ejection affected everything simultaneously. That would indicate that the theory of quantum entanglement would be in play here, right? Which ties into consciousness.
This basically that on a quantum level, the matter, kind of reacts, and that would then cause electromagnetic fields that can be measured. That's what we basically say here. But I have another slide, George, where you literally see the calculation in terms of light speed that brings the evidence that there is superluminal communication, which we talk about, faster than light communication of charged particles, subatomic particles. Shall I go ahead?
Go ahead. Thank you.
Okay. So case number 2. And case number 2 is a statistical analysis of CMEs. And this work wasn't done, when I started my thesis, I thought, oh, well, I probably have to, build a team of scientists, and we have to look at, petabytes of data and analyze it. But for the beauty of it, there was already teams out there that have done that already. So they used SOHO and, all the different satellites and probes out there, and they collected a lot of data. And you will see more pictures about published data. So all you see here is actually based on published data. So my background, as Grace explained it correctly, I was a little bit under the radar so far. So I probably wouldn't have the scientific standing that most of the people that published all these studies with the data have. So what I did is I just reinterpreted this data. And if you look at the case here, you will see that, for example, the solar cycle 25 that we are in, there's an 11-year cycle of the sun where, it literally goes from a very low activity to a high activity. It could be seen kind of similar to a biorhythm of a person. And if you look at the graph only, you already see, we had, I think, somehow, maximum sunspots showing up on the sun, and we've already exceeded 299 sunspots in solar cycle 25 versus 24. And if that's not statistically evident, I don't know what is. That's almost a doubling, or almost, a doubling of the cycles. And they can go up because we're just, if you see here the curve, and that's the predicted values here, that curve that you see here with the 3 lines, it can go much higher up. So something happened to the sun, and I go into more details later on. I first kind of did this statistical analysis, and then I said, okay, if I just analyze all the CMEs that have been ejected from the sun, that is kind of has a velocity, so it can overcome the magnetic, vector of the scalar field, and these CMEs are classified in C class, M flare, X class flares, and they basically say X is the highest magnitude, and the X class flares are affecting our planet big time, And so I first analyzed in step B only the M and X class flares to basically only look at the very strong energy intense flares. And then in the next step, in a C, first step A was obviously to look at the total number. I did the analysis of, because they actually had a table where they show how many CMEs were directed towards Earth that would hit us, and how many were directed away from Earth. And statistically, we analyzed this, and it's almost double the amount of CMEs that are ejected away from Earth. And now you may wonder, how is this the case? If you would go from we call this from Gauss proportional distribution, there should be equal amount of CMEs ejected from the sun. If you split, let's say, the sun in half and say, okay, everything that is to the right is directed to the Earth, and everything to the left is directed away, but it's actually doubled. So, to my opinion, this was the first evidence, and to me, one of these CMEs consciously, by modulating neutrinos and plasma flows in the sun's upper spheres. And to me, this is already a first evidence that the sun is consciously protecting our planet from harmful CMEs. It's not only directing them, more frequently away from Earth. If you look at the angles, and if you will read my study and my thesis, you will find, the angles, they talk about a much wider angle of the CMEs that are actually directed to Earth. And I always compare this to, let's say you would sit in a bus and you had to sneeze, you probably would either hold your breath, but if you had to sneeze, you would probably turn your head. So the sun does exactly the same. It literally waits until it ejects the very strong, CMEs, until the sunspot is turned away from the sun. And we have a very recent example that's exciting that I go in, that we can look at, where this is happening. And it's not only that it's directed, it's like if you take a water hose and you basically send water through the water hose. It would either, you could turn the hose to a very narrowed ray or like flow, or you could basically spread it out, like when you water your plants. And the sun literally does that. It actually is much more spread. So the effects on the planet are much less intense. And maybe there's another aspect, that just crosses my mind, thinking and reflecting about QMP. If you think about the quantum effect, let me go into it later. I just wanted to present you the raw data. I have a better example to posit what I just said. So if we go into case 3, that's actually this example on the October 4th. Actually, on October 3rd, there was an X.7.2 flare. And on October 4th, there was an X9 flare. An X9 is extremely immense. And, I will show you a couple articles from now predicted huge effects on the planet. And so this is basically just quoting the science alert. They immediately said, hey guys, on Earth, be careful, there's a huge thing coming. X9 was actually not happening for the last 10 years. So this was a significantly stronger, flare that actually was directed towards Earth. And I will show you a video what happened with it. So if we, this is basically the graph that shows, they predicted that we would be hit like on the 6th. And you see here on the 6th, this is actually then a measurement from, the GOES satellites, which measures the proton flux and the electron on the magnetic field, on the electromagnetic field of the planet. You see there is almost no effect yet, but here it starts to trickle down a little bit. But actually, in a nutshell, this coronal mass ejection was actually late, because it's funny. You see here all these news articles, the biggest solar flare since 2017 erupts, be prepared, and the sun emits X9. This is NASA, this is space.com, this is the Space Weather Prediction Center, which also publishes this graph here. And they basically calculated everything should arrive here on the 6th. And, on the 6th, nothing happened. So there was actually one person, and I, just quote him here. I think the name is here. He basically put out a missing, paper and said, hey, we are missing the impact that should hit the planet, but it didn't. And there's actually a guy out there who does really good videos about the scientific part, or let's say the traditional scientific part. His name is Stefan Burns, and he talks about all the effects and the angles in a very detailed way. So bear with me. On this slide, we could actually show a video that literally shows how these coronal mass ejections propagate from the sun. The sun is here, the yellow point, and Earth is here. I think it's a green point. You see it here, and here is the green point. And there is colors associated, like when you see the weather radar, black means the highest intensity, and the orange here. And Grace, if you could play that video, because I can show you an effect, how the sun actually interacts.
Yes, I will do that. Let me first remove this screen and then turn this back on. And yeah, so And
Okay.
that's it. Hold on. Okay, I'm gonna play. Okay, and let me know when to
So
stop.
yeah, yes. So here you see the wave propagating. This is the 7.1. The one here, stop. Can you stop?
Yep. You want me to reverse a little bit?
Yeah. So you saw there was yeah. Please go back until we can see. Go back about half of the. Oh, just bring it back exactly. Look at these waves here. Do you see? Can you see this black wave here? It's very dense matter. It's highly charged particles, which will disrupt the Earth magnetic field. And here is the planet. So everybody can basically say that this would hit us here in, let's say, 1 or 2 days. And just watch this black, I would say, cloud or plasma cloud dissolving, splitting in two, literally when it's supposed to hit our planet. Just look at it. If you can play, Grace.
Shall I play from the beginning or from here? Why don't I play from the beginning a little
Or you
bit,
can
right? Yeah, okay. Let me play it
no,
from
what you
there.
can do is you can live. Yeah, just watch it and then you wonderful. So you see it's black now. This is the first, and it literally split when just before it hit the planet. Isn't that beautiful to see? Because of quantum entanglement and the sun being in a position as a conscious being to even talk to every charged particle, which is conscious as well. He can literally communicate them and protect us from, not only not sending so many CMEs, even if they are actually sent, it can be influenced. And to me, this video, which of course is a projection, is a simulation of a computer, but this is not my data. This is literally the spaceweather.gov. This is your NOAA. This is your NASA people literally doing space weather prediction for all the airplanes, all the pilots, all the satellite, like Elon Musk's, satellites, no orbit satellites. And there is actually a story to that. Let's talk about actually a couple months ago, an event where we had such a strong emission of a solar flare with a CME that a couple hundred satellites actually were dragged down from their orbit, and they had to do an emergency intervention. And if you do your research, you'll find that this really happened. They had to literally correct these satellites from literally coming down to the planet, and it was hundreds of them, not just one. So the sun has an immense impact on the planet. And,
Alfredo, before you continue,
all the people out there use this page.
Alfredo, I was
Yeah.
just thinking, you went into the dark matter, meaning you're dark now. So I was wondering if because we have a different time zone. Do you want to
I will just put some light.
turn the lights? Yeah.
The light,
Yeah.
that's wonderful.
There's the sun.
I'm over here in Europe. That's the evidence. I'm here in Europe. The sun went down
Correct.
over here.
Right.
So thank you for reminding me.
Right.
So if you could go back to the presentation, I think
Okay.
whoever wants to go to either spaceweather.com, which basically gives you wonderful aurora pictures, or spaceweather.gov, and then you go to the enthusiast, to the space enthusiast, dashboard. You will see all these graphs that I'm showing here. So I'll close on case 2 for time reasons, and just bring on the next evidence, and think that's, George, what you meant, because there was another event on July 2024 where guess what, 3 or 4 different probes, some actually in the orbit of the sun. Lots of people criticizing the NASA for doing what they do, but I think I'm really grateful they actually sent us a probe, the Parker Solar Probe, literally almost into the orbit of the sun. So you see here is Mercury, Venus, and so on, and here is the Earth. And, this is a vast distance. You know that the light itself needs 8 minutes to travel from the sun to the Earth. And so what happened is they measured, and this actually blew my mind in terms of scientific data. This is not my data. This is my interpretation of that data. You'll see, I just created that table because it wasn't there before. You see the distance from the sun, 148 million kilometers for the SOHO, 149 because they're kind of in Earth's orbit, SDO, which is a solar dynamics observer satellite about later on. And then there's the Parker probe. Look at this. It's 6.8 million kilometers away. And if you calculate that, and then there's the GEO satellite. So there is a huge difference. You can calculate this yourself. This is 6 minus 1. So this is about 6.7 million kilometers of difference. And look at the time detected, because they have clocks. You know, these probes have clocks. 8:15, 8:15, 8:15, and 8:16. So you see the Parker probe, which was here, and these probes measured the impact of the measurement literally at the same time. And I just did a calculation with, you know, the travel time in terms of minutes that represents, and the propagation speed in kilometers per second, because light is measured in kilometers per second. You all know 300,000 kilometers per second. And even if you take, let's say, the 3D, you would get to a couple seconds, excuse me, you would get to a couple minutes. So if actually these effects are measured in the same time, that literally is, George, the evidence for superluminal communication and quantum entanglement effects. So that's why I wanted to actually posit it here in this slide. And this is also in my thesis, and obviously it's a scientific discussion. There may be scientists out there that say that absolutely doesn't make sense. But, you know, I just used the data and just, you know, literally interpreted it in a way to prove or to bring evidence that our sun is conscious and does what it does. I just explained in the presentation. There is another thing here, and this is my case 5, because, you know, we talked about the intimate relationship between our sun and the planet. Morphogenetic fields, there is a phenomenon called quantum dominance. So if you have, let's say, the entire galaxy, which has a morphogenetic field, obviously, and this morphogenetic field of the galaxy is distorted, it literally means that the morphogenetic field of our solar system is also distorted because of the quantum dominance effect. You can imagine that the field of the galaxy is much stronger and more intense than the solar system. And obviously the same happens in the relationship between our solar system or the sun and the planet. And the same, and I think this is really important for everyone that's listening to this podcast, is also relevant for your morphogenetic field of your body. If the sun, and I think the sun is the best we have, it's probably it's probably even less distorted than the galaxy. You know, if this quantum dominance effect that we are all taught about in the Biogenesis Academy actually is true, and in its effect, it literally means that we are influenced by the morphogenetic field of the galaxy, of the planet. So literally, it imprints a distorted, and you remember that kind of bioregenesis grid that was tilted, or, you know, the Fibonacci spiral, because it's a base 10, I would say, equation that is imprinted into your morphogenetic field. But let's keep it this. So what I want to show here is actually there is an asthenospheric explosion. There's a phenomenon. It happens very, very deep under the planet. So if you look at this graph here on the upper side, and it's actually a video that I wanted to play, which technically is not possible. But if you just imagine that the dense thing, and all that you see here is like fluid, liquid magma, and then you have the lithosphere, which is directly exposed to the magma, and then you have the asthenosphere. And the asthenosphere, basically, when they get pressure from, let's say, the magma being excited by quantum effects, by the way, from the sun, from CMEs, and so on. That's why we have more earthquakes after huge sun eruptions. And that's why we have volcano eruptions as well, because, you know, the pressure gets so high that it breaks through. But there's another aspect to it. If you look at the statistics, and again, this is just interpreted data that I used and created a table. You see the depth is always the same. The number of earthquakes doubled from 2010 to 2022. So that's definitely statistically relevant. Then the magnitude range went from 4.5 to 8, or let's say 7.2 to magnitude. It went from 5.6 to 6.3, which is definitely statistically relevant. And I come on a second into what the definition of statistically relevant is. And then the number of asthenospheric explosion literally doubled or almost tripled. And that's very worrying, because you can imagine the magma heats up because of the heating up or the excitement of the particles here in the Earth's crust. And actually some scientists, and here the name is too small to read at the moment, but I just want to credit the scientists because they did an amazing job in simulating all these magma movements. But you see, they do it like 1.24 million years ago. But guess what? This planet has already seen 4 or 5 mass extinction events. And I don't want to be here the doom guy, but this where actually humans were present on this planet, and it literally wiped them out multiple times. You can read this in the Bible. They give it other reasons, but this happened already. And to me, this simulation basically demonstrates how, the crust given to the more intense, I would say, radiation of the particles is melting, and from the bottom up. And I have another slide where I'm going to show these effects, exactly the same effects, with a very worrying trend. So I even would postulate, and I don't know, Grace, if it's okay to say this, we are on YouTube as well?
Yep. Feel free.
Do you allow me to say that eventually these mass extinction events were engineered? And I literally, with this graph or with this video, you can literally show how they do. This literally melts the crust from bottom. That will actually generate, continents to free float, and this is going to be like, if we think back about, Atlantis and what happened there, and Lemuria, where continents sunk and other came up. This may be an explanation. I'm not saying I'm 100% affirmative, but this could be an explanation of these effects. And I don't want to, say this is going to happen tomorrow, but it may happen in a couple hundred years, in a couple thousand years, but it's definitely not going to take, millions of years when this will happen. So I think it's good to know someone's out there in terms of scientific research, basically postulating these things, so we can think about it and in a multidisciplinary approach, maybe go deeper on it. Sorry, Grace,
but I'm glad that you brought that out, because you're not the only one. There's a lot of opinions there's already, and information that we as human beings have been deliberately affecting what's going on around us when it comes to the weather, right? So, and hopefully we would just hope that it would be for good intentions, but seems like there are nefarious intentions, because one of the questions that I was going to ask, or the people would want to know, is what causes the CMEs, or if the sun is conscious, how do we really get in touch with its consciousness, to be aligned with source consciousness. So anyway, so what you bringing that up, that it's highly probable, right? Yes.
Yeah, Alfredo. So if you
I can go into that, and actually there's a scientist out there. It's a real scientist.
Alfredo, if you say the sun is conscious and we're all connected.
Yeah, let me first answer the question of Grace.
Yeah, go ahead. Because it's a similar question, similar comment to Grace, because if the world connected by consciousness, then we would affect this. If your assumption is that the sun is conscious, that our consciousness would affect the sun and vice versa.
It does.
What we do on this planet would affect everything that's going on. So if you're seeing all this activity going on with everything going on around us, is it possible that we're affecting the consciousness of the sun, vice versa? So when they talk about weather change, when they're blaming it on, physical things that we're doing to the planet, is it maybe beyond that? that we are controlling it unconsciously because the sun is conscious. It understands what's happening. So your comment on that.
Yeah. To answer specifically your questions, yeah, your answer is actually yes. It's done by technology, obviously, and we antenna systems that actually try to do this, including this CDS ring in Switzerland, Geneva, that is also involved in that because it literally, propagates energy in massive amounts out there. But to go back to the original question of Grace, there is a scientist out there. His name is Dr. Dieter Bröers, and he's a German scientist. So most of his podcasts are in German, but sometimes he does, for example, podcasts with other people. And he actually, for example, knows Stefan Burns, the guy you saw on the space weather front. And he basically postulates that it's scientifically proven that we can influence the sun. They did not only influence the sun and let's say the upper spheres of the sun, crime rates in cities. This is statistically evident that conscious meditation of, let's say, groups of people can influence the behavior of the sun or even, reduce crime rates or do other things. And I have an extended section, I think it's about 6 to 10 pages about this phenomenon itself in my thesis. So yes, indeed, it's a very good point. Thank you for bringing that up. I just didn't focus on this in this presentation because it was more the cosmology. But to me, Dr. Dieter Bröers is one of the only or one of the few scientists who really talks about this bidirectional, because obviously the sun, influences our planet. And I showed many ways already in this presentation. It's the other way around. And if all people would actually meditate, for a sun, in a very harmonious way, sending it lava. That's the way we call love. That is unconditional love to the sun. The sun would people on this planet, and they don't always have good thoughts. And as we learned in QMP, every thought is actually producing a scalar field, is actually producing ultimately a matter. It will materialize in matter. So be mindful about your thoughts, and send the sun a lot of love in order to prevent, a certain, emissions from the sun to happen, even if it protects us because it really cares about us, as I've already tried to show. Does that answer your question,
Oh
George
yeah,
and Grace?
yeah. Yes. Perfect. And it just your presentation and it expanded our understanding that beyond what we normally know about the sun, because yeah, we know the sun is a physical star, the source of life, energy, and awareness. And a lot of the new age people would even say about illumination, growth, and vitality, which are all true. But it's beautiful that from the quantum perspective, the sun emits the scalar and plasma energies that can influence our consciousness and well-being. So it's like a cosmic information source or conversation, and that nourishes not just our bodies but also our spirit. So, and that connection is beautiful. So I was I my you made me dream, Alfredo, that maybe through you or with you we could invite that scientist. Hey, you speak also the language, so we could have a wonderful podcast conversation with him as well. Yeah. And I in either now or later, maybe you could share maybe what is the one best way that the audience, as the human beings, can intentionally connect with that source consciousness of the solar system or the solar consciousness. Okay, so
Yeah, very, very,
or
very
later.
happy to do that, Grace. Very happy to do that. It's very simple. Recognize the sun as a conscious being, because can you imagine, like, you sit in front of somebody someone who just doesn't believe you're alive or you're a conscious being, this is an insult, but like if little kids, they draw the sun, they give it a smile, they give it some eyes, and sometimes even more. So the little kids, they still connected, like intuitively to the sun, and give it kind of a conscious and a smile, or sometimes another expression in the face. But we lost our connection, and by literally connecting to it, recognizing it, thanking it, because there would be no life on this planet without the sun. If you just send lava or love, as normal people say it, and recognition and gratitude to the first 3 minutes. And if you probably heard Dr. Jerry Rivera Dugueña saying sun gazing is a good thing. Yes, it is absolutely, but do it in the first minutes when the sun comes up, because it has to do with angles, which I go into as well. And by the way, Grace, in my thesis, I talk about a Rishi level of consciousness of the sun. So I even explained, do you remember that slide with the spheres? The most outer sphere is actually a Rishi level of consciousness. And our sun has that. You have a Rishi level. George has a Rishi level. Every listener on this podcast has a Rishi level. I have one. And they talk to each other. The question is only, are you connected to it? But let's maybe quickly go through the presentation.
Please.
Because we also want to do a Q&A, and maybe there's some more interesting questions coming up later on. So the last slide is cosmic history. If you're not aware that humanity is, and you just read the bottom line here, is 950 billion years old. Not only what is taught by Keylontic Science and by the Quantum, the Bioregenesis Academy, that's also written in 12 metallic discs and 12 holographic discs. And those discs are still on this planet. They are accessible. And Ashayana Dean, who wrote these 2 books, Voyager 1 and 2, she literally accessed these books and downloaded the material. And what I did, as usually reinterpreting data that is already out there, I just created a table, what actually happened. Because you remember, why did I show this harmonic universe 1, harmonic universe 2? It's exactly for this slide. The original construct of our planet Earth was actually called Tara. And Tara was in harmonic universe 2, which means, just to repeat, dimension 4, 5, and 6. And through, I would say, insidious manipulation of the core seeds and the core crystals of the planet, it literally blew up. And it literally fall into, this is disruptive information about the cosmic history and, the interrelationship between all beings. It literally fell into harmonic universe 1. So this wasn't built like science says, they were particles and, they were heated and they were cooling down and getting attracted by gravity and so on. For this particular planet and for this particular solar system, it was different. It was literally I would say, constituting itself according to the morphogenetic blueprint that was much better at the time, into this harmonic universe. And why do I circle here? Because you see, there was originally 12 planets: Mercury, Venus, Earth, Mars, Maldak. Maldak was destroyed and is now this belt after Mars, that everybody can see. There's still evidence out there. Jupiter, Saturn, Uranus, Neptune, Pluto. And then there was Chiron, another planet that was destroyed, and Nibiru, other ones. So there is actually written, published papers out there, giving you the original blueprint or the original design of our solar system. But this was 550 million years ago. What nobody tells you is there was intelligent beings. And I would even suspect these people, or these beings at the time on Tara, they were spiritually much more evolved than we are. They could materialize, they could, bilocate. They could do many crazy things that you probably see only in superhero movies today. But they could do all these things. But they were actually a victim of and I don't like to use the word victim, but they were literally affected by these cataclysms that happened there. And I let you go through the Voyager 1 and 2 books. yourself. It's all there, and there's many videos out there. If you search for Voyager 1 or Oceanidine, I can only recommend do it before 2000, because there's also something bad that happened to the individual and the collective they were representing. I won't say more, not to insult anybody here. And maybe case 5, just to close my presentation. Case 5 is really fascinating. About 30 years ago, I have a dear friend. His name is Axel Klitzke. He already wrote a paper 30 years ago. I think, no, it's not actually 30. It's a bit less. 1997, he wrote a paper that is still available actually on the internet. I think it's horus.org or something where you can download. Unfortunately, it's in German, but he postulated at the time that there is an intergalactic cloud that is traveling from the Andromeda galaxy to meet with the Milky Way galaxy. And in the meantime, scientists actually confirm that the Milky Way and the Andromeda galaxy, and by the way, the Milky Way is a kid of the Andromeda galaxy, that hosts us, is about 12 times bigger, because it's the next dimension up, or the next harmonic universe. And so this extra plasma cloud actually hit us, and that's the real reason why the ice caps of this planet are melting. It's from the inside out. I mean, you saw the magma basically literally melting, but no scientist talks about that. And I hope you don't get any, comments, Grace, on your channel. But these ice caps melt, and what is the evidence? By the way, this was confirmed by the Russian Academy of Science even before NASA confirmed it, and then Dr. Tony Phillips from the JPL and NASA confirmed this as well. So this is scientific fact. Just the interpretation, for example, the ice caps on Mars are reduced, almost vanished. Jupiter, the cloud formations changed. There's dramatic influence in terms of, increase of wind speeds and everything in the atmospheric chemistry. Then Saturn, the ice rings changed in terms of, melting and density and structure of the rings. That can be observed, and is also evident. Just look for the papers. And then Pluto has a significant change in the surface ice structure. So, just think clearly, people. Just think clearly, my dear friends. If all the ice caps on the entire solar system are melting, is it a couple humans here driving around with cars, polluting CO2 into the air, the cause of that melting of the so-called climate change and the so-called global warming? I don't even want to call it bullshit. I just think you get the clue by yourself if you think about it and do your due diligence and do the research. What happens in our solar system? There's massive amounts of energies that are coming in because the Milky Way and the Andromeda galaxy get closer and closer to each other. And as the sun has a heliosphere, the Andromeda, that's when you basically do the sacred field blending, as we call it. And there's some trainings you can actually do with Bioregenesis Academy to learn that. When you do field blending of entire galaxies, there's effects. And it's always important to protect your fields when you do that. But I'll continue with Merkaba fields. I think probably everybody on this call understands what a Merkaba field is. For those just joining, it's two counter-spiraling vortex. One is clockwise, one is counterclockwise, and that's the ideal scenario. And there is actually a eternal life ratio, and that's what it's all about. Equally, like the source particles are phasing, and you see here the source particle 0 and 1, electric and magnetic, also circling in one or the other direction. These Merkaba fields, and every single atom, every single cell, every single person on this planet, every single planet has a Merkaba thing with the galaxy, is that this Merkaba spin is a same directional spin in a magnetic way. And that's literally the evidence why, if you think about black holes, and there is a massive black hole, that's not disputed by science, at the center of our galaxy, that's why all the light is matter as well. We talk about the quantas. And the quantums, and everything is sucked in, even light, because the magnetic vector of the morphogenetic field or the scalar field is dominant. And if a Merkaba spins correctly, it spins 33 1/3 clockwise, for the upper Merkaba, that's this one, vortex. And then the bottom Merkaba spins 11 2/3 counterclockwise. And I can only recommend everybody, because we are approaching a very significant day, the 21st of December this year, do the Merkaba spin every morning when the sun comes up, turn 33 1/3 times clockwise and 11 2/3 counterclockwise, and Merkaba spin of your, let's say, morphogenetic field of your body, but of every cell, because they will follow. That's the quantum dominance. Your morphogenetic field of your body will dominate the smaller morphogenetic field of your cells, and they will then start to turn in that direction. So turn 33 1/3 clockwise, seen from above, and 11 2/3 every morning and every evening, or when the sun sets. And that will actually give you a much better feeling. It always gives you a smile, and I do it every day to this day. But anyway, going back, I think there is this famous hadron collider in Geneva, and I just postulate that with massive energies, I think they talk about 7 giga electron volts or something. I don't have the value here now, but in my eyes and in the eyes of QMP, quantum morphogenetic physics, this is an immense waste of energy and funds and resources. There's hundreds of scientists, doing research. They claim they look for the smallest particle. Why did I put the source particle up here on the right? Quantum morphogenetic physics teaches the smallest particle in existence is the source particle, and it's perfectly aligned with source consciousness field. So why would you spend billions and billions and force collide subatomic particles, which is, to me, an absolute violation of cosmic laws, because if we postulate everything as consciousness, also these particles have consciousness. It's like smashing two flies into each other. Of course, they nerve, but you should not kill any conscious or sentient beings. So they just don't waste energy and funds. They also violate the cosmic laws, and we all know about karma. And I write big time about karma and how to dissolve karma in my thesis. So this is just, maybe we should speed up a bit because time is passing. I just postulate here that to me it's not correct to do that, because it influenced the core encryption ladders of each cell. And here you basically see, and I promised you in the beginning to show this quickly, this is the 15-step down step from pure consciousness, ether, plasma, scalar, pre-matter, so to speak, into these 5 pre-substance states, which go from plasm, endoplasm, thermoplasm, hydroplasm, ectoplasm. You probably heard this already in science fiction movie, but this is real. And then it goes in plasma, protoplasm, vapors, and it steps down until you get into the endoplasm, and you don't see the 15 line here, or I can't see it, where you basically then go into the dense matter. That's what you can touch here from your body. I just wanted to show this quickly because it's also in my thesis. And this will bring us to the last slide. And the sun is conscious. And I hope, or I trust, with this presentation, I could bring you some of the evidence why it is the case, but you probably already knew it is. The sun actually has been attacked massively by multi-planet-sized objects. They are hundreds of times bigger than our planet Earth. And they sucked so much energy out of the core seed atom, which, as I told you, on the humans is here. It's actually chakra 8 of the sun. Also, the sun has 15 chakras. It was literally, I would say, killed, but killed is not a nice term. It was actually brought into Bardoa phase. And the Bardoa is basically a transfer of consciousness, explanation. Nothing really dies because energy cannot be, it can be consumed, but it cannot be destructed. So when these 15 gamma radiation bursts, that were initiated on May 2007, so every year there was one chakra or the equivalent, I would say, dimension, actually, tampered with. I think from a legal perspective, we could actually talk about attempted murder, because if you postulate or if you accept that the sun is a conscious being, that should be actually sanctioned. And the question now is, who could represent the sun? Because usually when you have a court case, the victim, if it's half dead, cannot represent itself. So there's usually an attorney or a lawyer to represent it. But obviously with the sun, it's a bit different because it represents a rishi level of consciousness. So who could do that? And there's actually a association that is called the Interdimensional Federation of Free Worlds. And the term free worlds is really the decisive, expression. It's all, and this is an intergalactic, association that is real and that is represented here on this planet. So I formally, in my first podcast, stipulate and request that the Interdimensional Federation of Free Worlds would represent the sun in front of the Galactic Federation, but I would prefer it's the IFFW, to basically just show these, I would say, also, if everything's conscious, also the, I would say, beings that attack the sun cannot get away with this, So I'll close with that, and would just like to thank everybody for the attention. And I just found this cartoon and I thought it's hilarious, Look at this picture. The sun is actually looking at itself and says,
I love that.
all these sunspots, they always happen when I have an important date. And, talking about dates, there is actually Stargate activation circles that happen every couple thousand years. And, there's also star fire circles, so that the cosmos is full of circles, and we are actually really in front of the next star fire circle, which is going to happen between 2047 and 2052. And you haven't heard this on a podcast, probably, except from Jerry Unfiltered. This is basically the ringing the whistle on cosmic happen, and the sun is literally preparing with a lot of sunspots for this huge thing. And there's one last slide, and I actually wanted to show a video. It's beautiful. I'll probably have to send it to you after this podcast. It's literally showing the sun, and you have a sunspot here, and then is another one here, and we call this sympathetic solar, eruptions, and it's beautiful to see. It's literally like a dance, and to me, it even means more. It's actually the sun sending greetings to humanity on this planet. And I think it happened sometime earlier this year, I think in August, during my writing of the thesis. And I just would like to thank everybody listening here, but I would and mostly thank the sun, the planet, and its hosting sun, which is called Sala in Andromeda Galaxy M31, and Urja, which is the planet that hosts our planet. Without these two objects, we wouldn't be around in this time. We wouldn't have this podcast. This is my postulation, and we have a FFW across the entire galaxy. I can just encourage you to learn Anuhasi, because it's a language that is spoken by more living conscious beings than any other language, which they say Salaatu, which means the eternal sun returns, which means hopefully we can bring back our sun into a living, breathing, loving being. And with this, I close and give back to Grace. Thank you very much.
Wow, fantastic. Thank you very much as well. So I don't know. I just know that we need to do more of this, because there's much things to learn, to remember. Okay, and you mentioned a lot of words that are really new to many people, and we won't have a lot of time to make to discuss more about it. However, perhaps I could ask George also and share whatever your thoughts, what comes in your mind through this presentation. Like maybe we could have a simple definition of the quantum morphogenetic physics or quantum morphogenetic fields, source consciousness fields, because those are like basic things, like mentioning source consciousness, that people just spit it out like no other, like, but we don't really talk about the same thing. So feel free, George, to chime in, and Alfredo to do some. We have, let's say, we have 12 minutes more. George,
So,
you have.
thank you for your presentation. It's enlightening. I guess it brings up a lot of questions that modern day science would be asking. I'm sure that they would question you on a lot of these things. Um, but when it gets into the quantum morphogenetic physics, which is beyond what we're being taught, um, yeah, that's are discussions that need to be open. But you can tie it to everything that's happening in the world today, and this whole thing about our planet uh, climate changing. Well, it is changing. We are in the cycles, and it does change. Now, how it gets affected by things like sunspot, how much that's affecting everything, and can we really influence it physically? When I'm talking about physically driving less gas, we have to be um, stewards of our own planet. That's true, but our effects on the weather is a question. What really affects the weather? There's so many other aspects of this, and if it is the sun and it is tied to consciousness, then it's our responsibility as humans to actually address that. And we can't address that until we get our act together as human beings and have some peace and harmony among us, right? So that's a big question, and I always it's interesting when we talk about the age of the planets. And some scientists, we talk about 13.8 billion years old, but that's only as far as they can see. So when we start talking about the planet being 950 billion years old, that really raises a lot of eyebrows. How can you say that, right? Where's the evidence of that? And that's always a question, So people are raising that question and saying maybe that's because it's as far as we can see. Maybe it's much older than that. Things happened way beyond this. In our human history, basically, that's one thing about our human history that we're being taught. Question mark there. What's really true? Everything's coming out. You see evidence all over the place suggesting that maybe our civilization is much older than it is, right? And the sun's been around a long time, so the influence of the sun to the planet is a big. That's a very interesting subject you brought up. And if you go beyond that, if you just talk our solar system, there's other solar systems that have many suns beyond this too. So the question is, could that consciousness be connected to other suns on other planets, right? Because of all consciousness connected, and it's all by, quantum entanglement. We start talking about that. Then we're talking about the whole universe and how it's connected, right? What happens here, what happens other places too. So, the thought process of how we would, imagine that being, right? Andromeda is our closest next galaxy. But we know that there's other suns there too, and our effect that we would have on that planet too, and the sun would have on it. So you bring up a lot of interesting concepts that I guess would be a good discussion to have about modern day science. I'd like to see how they would express their feelings towards what you were saying. You brought up a lot of good evidence, and that's a big thing. There is a lot of evidence out there. You can tie a lot of things together. How the belief system, so that we've been taught, that varies so much. And it goes even beyond, science, what we believe to do, right? If you tie in religion and what's been taught there, how everything's tied together, really, right? And even ancient civilizations and how they looked at the sun, how they believed where it played into our solar system and our planet is a big question mark. So, but I appreciate your insight on that. It opens up a can of worms. We go much deeper, right?
Right. Yeah. Sure. I mean, thank you, George, for your great questions. There were many of them, and I would just say with the 14.3 billion years that science is saying is when the Big Bang happened. That basically demonstrates their limited event horizon, literally. Because it's evident that humanity and first of all, source consciousness field is timeless, and it's dimensionless, spaceless, so to speak. There is no limit to it. But there were multiple cycles, and this also shows, because as a scientist we always talk about the potential calculator, and now calculate to look at the potential. If how many times can you multiply 14.3 in 950 billion? Just to see what the potential of consciousness expansion there is for all these people out there. And my real intention for this thesis was to spark a lot of scientists to think a little bit beyond. And I just, something crossed my mind, Grace. If we could invite Rupert Sheldrake, on a panel here and discuss, because he actually kicked it off, and I think he's probably quite excited that somebody takes his thesis and expands it. And I would be very curious about his reactions. I would love to have a discussion with Dieter Breurs, that sits in our board of the Bioregenesis Academy as a scientific consultant. And
I would do my best to
discuss
find
this.
a way to invite them. Yeah.
Even the concept of a multidimensional universe.
Very happy to come back. And I, unfortunately,
I'll find a way.
Exactly.
I'll do my best.
But I forgot all the other questions you raised. The good points you brought up, George.
Yeah, I was going to say, I read an article
as well.
I read an article of a scientist that was talking about Age of the Planets, and he brought up that when we talk about multidimensional universe, opens up a whole different aspect of, if you think about that there could be multiple universes, right, around us. So we're only talking about maybe ours, but there could be other universes outside of what we see today, right? When they talk about multidimensional universe, that opens up a whole different concept that many people just have a hard time understanding. It takes a lot. You have to really dig deep down inside to even imagine that we're existing in a universe, that other universe around us at the same time, right? It was just when we can't the angular rotational particle spin, that we can't see those other universes around us.
Absolutely.
So it really gives a deep try to understand what's happening. It's sometimes beyond our comprehension as humans, right? That you have to change your paradigm, how you think, what could be possible, right? So even everything you brought up could very possible. It's just trying to get proof is always the question. They say, where's your scientific proof, right? But everything in science, even theory, is just a theory, right? Theories are there because that's what they're theoretical. They're still open for interpretation, new scientific proof to change it, right?
I think the biggest, problem our scientific community has at the moment is that they are actually bound by a paradigm that postulates only what you can see, touch, and measure is real. And you just talked about the angular rotation of particle spin, which is absolutely essential because all these galaxies exist at the same time, multidimensionally, and it's separated by different, angular rotation of particle spin. So they just can't see it, but they can measure the indirect quantum effects of those, let's say, higher dimensional influences that we have, or quantum effects that we have. So absolutely. And there's not only multiple universes, there's multiple cosmoses. Creation is limitless. You can imagine if the source consciousness field doesn't have any limit in terms of time and space, obviously everything that it created is limitless. Multiple cosmoses that we call cosmeas, and probably beyond that. You know about the Akasha A and the Akasha Aya. So there's a structure to it in eternal life systems that we won't have time to go into today, but I'm very happy to come back and talk about these aspects.
Well, thank you, everyone. Thank you, Dr. Alfredo. Thank you, George. So, Dr. Alfredo, any last few words or parting? And would you like me to post your Gmail if you wanted people to get in touch with you? And we encourage everyone either directly to get in touch with him, and then or email me for your questions and comments, and let's continue this conversation.
Absolutely. Thank you so much, Grace, for hosting
thank you, Grace.
me here. It was a real pleasure. It was enlightening. Especially, I could I could feel this field, not only from the three of us, but from the entire community listening. And I'm very happy to answer questions, probably ideally once my thesis is published and they have read the paper. But if they have any questions to this podcast, and the sun is the best we have. So, there's many practices out there from people doing yoga and meditations and everything, activations. If you really want to get my best shot on having an effect on, the morphogenetic field of the sun, connect with it in the first 3 minutes, let's say 12 minutes of the day, and in the last 12 minutes of the day, and send it love and gratitude, communicate with it, because that's what it wants. It recognizes each and one of you as a conscious being with at least the consciousness level that it has itself. So try to connect to your higher identities, connect with the sun, and give it a big hug from me, because I do this every day. And send it lava and appreciation, and ask it for any help. And intake your the I would say the photons, the science would call it, but the energy, the source currents from the sun directly, because it has the best energy there is. And I tell you, the best energy in the entire galaxy. So my recommendation for the people listening in, do a lot of activity, synchronize your body, mind, and spirit, send lava to the sun, and you'll see it will respond. It will send you lava back. And that's the most beautiful thing on the planet. Thank you so much.
Much gratitude to you as well, Dr. Alfredo, and from me, Grace Sunga Sagra, Eya Vezurahe of Quantum Nurse Freedom International podcast. And you could check out my website of graceasagra.com. And there will be a link there for the Russia, which also Dr. Alfredo is fully aware of that, because we studied under Dr. Jared Eugenio, who is also the inventor and inventor of the Russia and founder of the Bioregenesis Academy. And thank you. And thank you to all, and thank you to the sun. I love the sun. Without the sun, I would have not survived in America. Okay. So thank you, and
Thank you.
share to everyone. All right.
Absolutely.